Here's a physician and researcher from California called Dr. Dan Erickson. Erickson and a partner just delivered a 50-minute briefing on the latest numbers from California. The video they made has been viewed millions of times in a few days online. The bottom line is, after looking carefully at the data, these two researchers have concluded that California should end its shelter-in-place order. Watch.
We've seen 1,227 deaths in the state of California with a possible incidence or prevalence of 4.7 million. That means you have a 0.03 chance of dying from COVID-19 in the state of California. 0.03 chance of dying from COVID in the state of California. Does that necessitate sheltering in place? Does that necessitate shutting down medical systems? Does that necessitate people being out of work?
These are serious people who've done this for a living for decades. They have in their hands the largest currently available data sets on this question. And the question they're asking after analyzing all of those numbers, are the lockdowns worth it? So what is the answer to that? So whatever your view of the mass quarantines, and maybe you're enthusiastically for them, the questions you just heard are valid questions. In fact, they're critical questions. We should all be asking those questions, including and especially our policymakers. But as Dr. Erickson pointed out later in the video, dissent of any kind is no longer tolerated in this country. Fact-based honesty, which is the soul of science, is under attack, even in hospitals. Dr. Erickson described physicians being pressured to classify illnesses and deaths as related to coronavirus, whether they believe that to be true or not.
We aren't pressured to test for flu, but ER doctors now, my friends that I talk to say, you know, it's interesting, when I'm writing up my death report, I'm being pressured to add COVID. Why is that? Why are we being pressured to add COVID to maybe increase the numbers and make it look a little bit worse than it is? I think so.
So what you just heard, what Dr. Erickson described, is called lying. And lying has no place in science ever. It's scary to think it takes place on a large scale in hospitals. He says it does. Viewers of Erickson's video were shocked and transfixed by this. They forwarded the video to friends who forwarded on to their friends. And suddenly, millions of people who have spent the last 6 weeks on a diet of Tiger King and internet memes were watching sober-minded medical researchers reading from charts of statistics. It's hard to recall a science video taking off like this one did. Not everyone was impressed by it. Some criticized the doctor's policy conclusions, and of course that's fair. Decent people have different opinions. We're not entirely certain what the perfect response to this pandemic is. Nobody is certain. There's no objective answer at the moment. At best, we can plod along with open minds and good faith. More informed debate is exactly what we need to make wise decisions going forward. Unfortunately for all of us, informed debate is exactly what the authorities don't want. They want unquestioned obedience, so they're cracking down on free expression. Last night, the doctor's video, the one you just saw, was pulled off of YouTube, the largest video hosting site in the world. It wasn't an accident. YouTube admitted doing it. The company cited a violation of, quote, community guidelines, and they did not apologize. Looking back, when all of this is finally over, and it will be, it's likely that we'll see this moment, what YouTube just did, as a turning point in the way we live in this country, a sharp break with 250 years of law and custom. The two doctors' video was produced by a local television channel in California. It was, in effect, a mainstream news story. The video was not pornographic. It didn't violate copyright or incite violence or commit libel. It didn't break any law. The only justification for taking it down was that the two physicians on screen had reached different conclusions from the people currently in charge. It was a form of dissent from orthodoxy. YouTube and its parent company Google have now officially banned dissent. The CEO of YouTube admitted that openly. So no, this is not about science. Censorship never is about science. It's about power. Big technology companies are using this tragedy to increase their power over the American population. They're working in concert with politicians in order to do it. Just today, Facebook removed an events page for a political protest in Michigan. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who runs that state, was no doubt pleased to see it. Grossly mismanaging an entire state is a lot easier when citizens are not allowed to complain about it, and now they're not. Last week, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg explained that protests like these are no longer protected political speech. They're, quote, misinformation. Dr. Dan Erickson is an emergency physician and co-owner of Accelerated Urgent Care. He was censored, you may remember, if you recognize his face, because you saw him on YouTube before it was pulled down. He made the mistake of questioning the coronavirus lockdowns. We're happy to have him on to join us tonight. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on. I have to ask you, for about 48 hours, you were the most famous physician in America as millions of people watched you explain the coronavirus lockdowns, and then big tech censored you. Do you feel vindicated by these numbers?
Well, I think, I don't know if vindicated is the right word, but I think we're finding that a lot of different institutions are in agreement with our numbers. We're all seeing about a 4% positivity rate for the immune testing. So whether it's USC, whether it's Stanford, we're all getting similar numbers. So when we first came out with our data, they said these are wildly inaccurate, and they were raw data. And currently, we're putting our data in a more scientific format so they can biostatistically analyze it, and we can sort of re-give the data in a different format. But our goal the first time was just to give some raw data, but it turns out that raw data was pretty accurate to what some of the more sophisticated studies are finding.
Well, not only was it pretty accurate, at least the data you presented in your now famous YouTube video with your partner, they turned out to be far more accurate than the data the media bombarded us with that the World Health Organization gave to us at the beginning. You turned out to be much closer to the actual outcome than they did. Why do you think that is?
Well, we've done over 11,000 tests, and we were actually using raw data. We weren't using academic modeling. Academic modeling are good for an academic purpose to try to, sort of predict certain outcomes, but they don't often give you very accurate numbers. We saw millions of cases predicted, and that didn't really come out to be very accurate. So my goal was just to present raw data and say, here's where I'm at. We've tested this many people, this many are positive. It wasn't supposed to be a really technical analysis, but the raw data that we've been following from everybody else seems to be about the same. So I think instead of using the academic modeling, I think next time we go through a pandemic, we ought to just kind of look at our raw data and maybe make decisions that don't cause a $22 trillion economy to kind of collapse.
So we should follow the science, in other words. What does it tell you about the state of the country right now that you were attacked, vilified, censored for trying to do science?
Well, I think what's interesting is what makes this country great is a variety of ideas and often competing ideals. We started this country with people with very different ideals, but part of the beauty of it is we can sit down, reason together, and come up with solutions, even if we disagree with one another. And I think we're in kind of a dangerous position if we say someone's opinion needs to be shouted down and buried as opposed to discuss and come up with the best conclusion. So I know, YouTube and these different companies are privately owned, and they're free to do that. But I think it's not the best policy, and I don't think we get the strongest opinions and the strongest solutions to come to the surface if we just shout down and take people off the air that have opinions that differ from what the masses are saying.
I'm smiling because you're making a powerful case for what we used to call diversity, which is no longer allowed. The ironies mount. Dr. Erickson, it's an honor to have you on tonight. Thank you.